Hi everyone, Alex again. Got a photo editing tutorial here for you today. Now I'm always encouraging people to give it a go. I'd really love if you would edit along with these. Don't feel like it's an instructional video, it's just an encouragement for you to do some practice along with me. You know, I'm using Adobe Lightroom, but you can do any photo editing software out there, and we'll do very similar things these days. So open something up, find a photo you want to work on, and give it a go. Yeah, think of it like doing some scales on an instrument, or your yoga practice or something like that. All right, here we go. Okay, let's get started with this photo. Now, you can see I've called it up here Maddie Fish. Now this is Maddie in the photo, a bit underexposed. This would have been a test shot I did to make sure my camera settings were okay. And as you can see, they were, it's all a bit dark. But that's the beauty of photo editing, because there could be a nice photo hidden under here if we just, tinker around with everything. And, there's some great colours already in the photo. She's sort of got reddy hair, and then there's blue behind her, so there's already a nice contrast, and then the yellow of the sand. So there's actually quite a lot to work with, so hopefully, we can make it pop. The other thing I can see is, although, it's, the image itself looks quite underexposed, up here in the histogram, everything's crammed into the lower half, so midtones start around here and then goes down to shadows here, which means we've got all this room up here in which we can, change the exposure digitally afterwards, and we might even be able to salvage it into something presentable, because there is all this space up here. We do have to look out. You can see there's a few little details up here at the top. That's probably representing, there's a highlight here on her neck and, bits in her hair. And that's probably this little top tail in the histogram is probably telling me about those bits in the photo, if I had to guess. So we just have to watch that as I, raise the exposure, I don't accidentally lose detail in, her hair and the skin texture on her neck there. Now, I should just thank Maddie for posing for this one. This was a photo shoot for her. She's a physical performer and a clown and things like that, and she had a show that she was doing some publicity for based on a fish theme. All right, here we go. So let's have a look at the histogram. It's already doing a bit of color. The temperature's being corrected for us here, so it's at 5700. I'll just play with that just to show you what it does. You can use this. It's supposed to be to correct any mistakes that you made while you were taking the photo, I should say. But actually you can use it, as an effect. Like if I wind it all the way up to this end, you're getting, there's a definite look going on there, which might be what you desire. However, for today, I'll leave any color correction and business like that until later, because we want to work on the exposure and getting more from what's actually there and the histogram first before we go into making artistic decisions. So I'm just going to raise the exposure until I see that little tail I was talking about, with the highlights. Just knock almost up against the end of our histogram up there, so you can see I'm watching that little extra tail up here that I'm not going too far up there, and also watching the photo. I feel like I'm starting to be able to not see what's going on in her neck there a little bit, but more importantly, like the face is usually what you want to focus on if you're doing a portrait of someone. So I'd always just keep an eye on what's happening on someone's face as I was raising the exposure, just to make sure, as well as being technically correct in the histogram, I'm enjoying what's happening in the photo itself. So yeah, I can take it quite bright, but as you can see, it starts to look as if it's going a bit bright in these highlights in the hair and on the back of her neck. So in that case, we're just going to grab the highlights here, take those down a little bit. Maybe I'll do the whites as well. So I always hold Option on my Mac when I'm adjusting the whites, because that tells me when I'm starting to lose information. You can see there, all those white bits are where I've gone too far, and it's now saying, you're just going to get a white patch in your photograph there, which means we're losing things like texture and color. So let's take it down away until we can't see any. We can leave a tiny bit, but I'm just going to leave that one tiny little blob there. See how it looks now. So, all right, still looks a bit bright. So technically there is information there, but it's just going a bit much. So I'm going to play with the highlights. Let's wind the highlights right down and see if that doesn't make things weird. Maybe I can take the contrast down as well. Although you can see as you do that, things start to go grey. Yeah, I'm making artistic decisions already. I shouldn't be. I should be working on the technical part, but actually, you can see as I wind it right up, it's more interesting than if I wind it right down. So in that case, I'd usually go back to the middle, which you can do by double clicking or sliding. And I will, in fact, just wind it towards the more contrasty side on the right, see, because I like that better. So again, I just hit it's the backslash button above the return key on my Mac, and I can toggle between the original photo and what I've got now. And I mean, you can already see the difference in the exposure. And I've pretty much got all the details I want still. Yeah. I will try and work on, I know it's a small thing, but because the back of her neck's so bright, it is drawing your eye a little bit, so I might try and work on that a bit later. But for now, let's ignore that and go, because actually in this first photo, it is looking a bit better. You can tell that it's skin rather than just sort of like a white blob on a photo. So let's park that for now and just work on everything else. So let's look at the texture. It's always nice to wind that in a bit. Don't wind it in too much. Because what it does is accentuates the difference between a highlight and a contrast. And if you're doing a publicity image for someone else, it can accentuate any lines in people's faces more so than in reality. So you don't want to wind it right up. I don't like going this way because it makes it look cloudy. So I usually wind it up just a little bit so you can see people's skin texture a little bit more. And what I try and do is have an image of what they were like when I was there with them. So as I'm not, accentuating something that isn't there. You can see there as well. But I do like skin texture. I think it's important in a photo. So I'd never really want to try and get rid of, things like anything that shows, a bit of character on someone is interesting. And also, you don't want to just Photoshop everyone to look like they're 21 years old all the time. So it's boring, right? See what the vibrance is doing. Something interesting happening here. I usually say in these tutorials, don't push things too far to the point where they look unrealistic. But I'm kind of enjoying, just because there's so much difference between, maybe not with the saturation, I'm going to leave the saturation where it is, but the vibrance. Like that sky is really coming out, and the difference between the colour of the sky and her hair is working, I think. So I'm going to leave that up a little bit. I'm going to take the saturation down a bit. Because it seems to be taking into a more realistic kind of area if I do that. Now, I'll come back to this. I think I might be able to fix those highlights on the back of her neck with this. Let's just have a quick play with it. You sort of don't want to do it at the expense of the rest of the photo though. Sorry, this is just me playing, but that's basically how I learned to do all this Photoshop business, is just by playing around. So you can see the more I move that one, the brighter the back of my neck gets, which isn't necessarily desirable. Haven't quite solved that one yet, but I'll come back to this. you can sort of see almost, it echoes the histogram here in this tone curve. So you can sort of see where the problem area is. There's just this tiny little blip of information at the end that I'm pushing a little bit too far. And it's causing me problems. It's making me feel like I'm losing detail in her neck area there. I'm fiddling with this more than I said I would at this stage, but sometimes you just get stuck on things. I don't exactly know what this peak is as well. Anyway, this is good. Have a play with this. You can always reset everything you do, and it will give you an idea of the histogram a bit more the more you play with this little tone curve. But for now, I don't love the tone curve. A lot of people like it. Sometimes you can do like a bit of an S-curvy thing that, you know, everyone's a big fan of on the internet. I don't know. I don't use it so much, but you know, people love it. You'll see plenty of other tutorials out there for it, so don't worry about me. Now, what we want to do, sometimes when you're photographing someone in the hot sun and they're standing up for a while, you know, they tend to go a bit pink on camera, which isn't how they appear in real life. So you can see her skin is going quite red, and that actually wasn't the case at all on the day, so it's just a bit of a trick of the camera. So I think it's okay to correct her skin tone back to what's a bit more natural, because I promise you she didn't look that red in real life. And actually this red little thing here, you know, if you go one way she goes very magenta, if you go the other she sort of loses all the tone of her skin completely and starts to look a bit sick. But if you just go a little bit of the way, it brings back the sort of natural look of her skin that she had on the day. Same with this one. I mean, I think I've said in previous videos, these top three I tend to find are very handy if you're trying to get a good skin tone pretty quickly. And I'm just eyeballing it. I mean, on a really detailed photo, I'd take it into Photoshop and I might even have a reference there, you know, a better photographer beside, you know, the front of a Vogue magazine or something if I'm trying to match someone's skin tone. And you can do a few tricks. You know, you've got a little eyedropper tool that tells you the exact color of things. We can go into that at a later date, but for now, I'm just going to fiddle with these. It's actually doing like interesting things, not to the skin tone so much, but my background. And I'm enjoying actually going more towards the minus than the plus side, I think, which, you know, goes very yellow there. But if I go down that way, enjoying what it's doing in the sand. It's just giving it a bit of an extra orangey tinge. I'll just have a play with all these other sliders just in case it does something that I'm not seeing. You see, like with that one, I'm getting nice tones out of the sky if I play with it. Even though it's the aqua, you know, you're going to see much more change if you play with the blue slider. That's why it's fun to just play, because you never know, something might be labeled something by, you know, whoever the manufacturer is, this software, and it might do something that you're not expecting if you just play with it rather than, you know, trying to be all technical and doing exactly what you're supposed to. I think it's fun just to play around. Don't tell anyone that though. So, I mean, I've only really played with the hue here. What I can do is play with the saturation. And here's a fun trick. This little thing here that picks a color for you. So click on it and then say, what if I wanted her lips to go bright red? You'd actually click on the photo and then if I slide my mouse up, well, it's not really working in this case, it picks that exact color that I've selected and adjusts the saturation of that. I'm going to undo that because obviously there's a lot of red in this photo and it was picking up on that and changing everything. But maybe the blue will work better for me. There you go, you can really see. You know, I can make the sky completely black and white basically because there's not that much blue anywhere else in the photo. But it's picking whatever you aim your little cursor at once you click this round thing. it grabs that color and it either boosts it or, depending on which way you move your mouse, it changes it. So it can be very exciting sometimes. So let's make it quite blue. Let's try with the sand as well, see what that does. Yeah, this is a good example of where the sand is too close to her skin tone maybe, so it's a bit dangerous to play with it too much. But I've left a little bit in, just because I was looking at her skin then, and actually the change isn't so dramatic that it's weird. But, as always, I like to scroll between what the original photo was, and you can kind of see that the colours look fairly natural still. Like the colours don't appear to change that much, but just the brightness of the dark bits gets more. I hope that makes sense. Let's go to our little luminance tab, and luminance means basically how bright something is, and maybe this will fix our little problem on the back of the neck here. Maybe not. Maybe it takes it too far too soon. Let's just try it again. Sometimes if I go too far, I like to just undo and then do a more subtle change. It's actually a little bit better. It's actually not too different from the original there. I mean, it's slightly more so, slightly brighter than it was. You're getting a bit more of a punchy highlight right there on the back. If I was doing this for something else, I'd take it into Photoshop, and there's a thing you can do called, there's a dodge and a burn tool, and you can use those to adjust really specific bits of exposure. There will be Photoshop tutorials coming up. I thought I'd start with Lightroom because it's kind of the most fun in a way. It's the most satisfying the most quickly. So that's why I'm starting there. Now, before we get to my favorite bit, the color grading, because I'm quite happy that, technically the photo is not looking too bad. Again, it's sort of going a bit strange up here. It's looking a bit digital there because just the pixels in her hair. There's something funny happening with how the camera itself captured the change between the highlights in her hair and the shadows. And that's just because, I need to fork out for a better lens, basically. That's something you could fix in Photoshop. That kind of detail I wouldn't usually do in Lightroom. But for now, let's just acknowledge that, it's a part of how the camera works, and let's embrace those little those little things that happen. I'm skirting around the word mistake, because sometimes you can get really bogged down on details as well, and if I move back from the photo and squint a little bit, it kind of doesn't matter, and most people are just going to be looking at someone's face actually. Now what I'm doing here, just enable the profile corrections. I mean, after I was just saying I need a better lens, but I'm embracing the problems with the lens. This actually fixes a couple of little problems with the lens, and actually you can sort of see it pretty well here. So yeah, the big problem is the lens is round and a photograph is rectangular, so it's just fixing a little bit of what happens around the sides of the rectangle based on the fact that it's a circular lens. That makes more and more sense the more and more photography you do. Yeah, so let's get to the color grading. Now, because, it is a human face, it might be nice to just try and get a bit more fleshy tone. Playing with the mid-tones at the moment, but that's not really doing what I'm after, so let's try it with the highlights. Let's just see if there's, we get a bit of a fleshy highlight. And this area of the circle is generally where everyone's flesh tone lives, no matter what their, cultural heritage may be. There's not a lot of difference, believe it or not, in skin tones. I don't know if that says something political or not, that actually we're all very close on the colour wheel. This is probably the wrong platform for a political statement, so I'm going to leave it there. But what I am going to do is, play with the photo highlights. Something nice that's happening around here, because it's giving a sort of golden look to everything, and those highlights that were sort of looking a bit white before, while it is making, giving her a nice glow around her face, it's actually adding nice colour into those highlights that were almost a bit much beforehand. I wonder if I can turn this down a bit. Yeah, so you can turn down the highlights from here, which isn't something I do very often, but in a case like this where I've just had a bit of trouble dealing with those kind of super contrasty blobby highlights, it's a good place to deploy this, maybe. And what I might do after is just raise the shadows again right at the top, but we'll come back to that. So again, let's just switch off the color grade and see what actually the difference is. And you can see, I mean, as I keep saying in these videos, it's all about, in this tab, giving the whole thing a filmic look, which I think it's already sort of getting there. That looks like a nice technical sort of photo. That gives it a bit of extra depth. I think so anyway. So let's play here. There's something nice I always find in this part of sort of from about here to about here for the shadows. When I'm grading. And part of it is because of color temperature, and the sun is a very warm color temperature. And your eye sort of sees anything not being directly hit by the sun as a bit cooler. And it's good to think of light like that in photography as warm and cool, rather than green, yellow, red, whatever. Warm and cool sort of, will get you a bit further, I think. So, it's an artistic decision going on here. What am I trying to say with this image? What does it all mean? I think, actually, if I chuck a bit of green in, almost more like a pure green, something quite interesting going on there. You might not agree, but hopefully you're editing along with me. I mean, one nice thing it's doing is it's sort of taking the pinky tinge that the camera's showing her skin there, and she sort of looks, a bit less like she's been standing up for too long and the blood's drained out of her face. Not completely, just that's what happens when a model's standing up for a while. Yeah, that's actually cool. There's something nice about that green. I hope you agree with me here. So again, I like to divide my color grading pies into threes. So if I've gone up on that angle with the shadows, up on that angle with the highlights, just in case, I'm going to take my midtones to the bottom somewhere and see if anything nice shows up. And what I always do is just crank it right up as much as I can. And see if anything takes my fancy, and then crank it down so it doesn't look quite so artificial. Funnily enough, here there's some nice things going on more over here. I mean, it's adding a bit of that readiness back into her skin, but is that a bad thing? Let's find out. I mean, the colours now, there's something interesting. I think there's something very interesting going on there. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a photo. I think it's looking good. Yeah, there's a global thing you can do here too. Let's not go into that for now. Let's just stick with this first thing. Now, after I've picked colours I like, I always just have a quick play with these in case I can do some blending that's going to make it look a bit nicer. Again, just run it right along to all the extremes and see if anything nice happens along the way. Then land on something you like. Maybe I went too far with the green. So let's just boost it a little bit. Yeah. I mean, whether or not it looks good, it's definitely got a filmic look. So let's look at the original. And that's where it's got to. And now let's just switch the grading on and off. Yeah, I mean, that looks very natural. That looks quite filmic. So I'm gonna call that a success for today. So that's the sort of fun bit done. I mean, as always, you can have a play with your vignetting. I think in this case, you know, that's just an effect. Oh, you get a nice little something if I just nudge it a little bit. I'm not going to labor on that too intensely. Now, I was going to boost the shadows a little bit. Just what I think is bothering me at the moment is this line down her hair. It sort of looks a bit boxy. Whereas in real life it would be a bit more round. So if I boost the shadows, hopefully there's less sort of less of contrast between the bit that isn't being directly hit by the light and the bit that is, which in theory makes it more round. And maybe the contrast's gonna... Maybe I'll remove that contrast I boosted earlier. Yeah. Do you see what I mean there? Hopefully some of this makes sense. And, you know, there's still a lot of information here that, you know, I could drag up, but I don't know if that does anything for us. Yeah, I don't know. Let's undo what I just did then. So hopefully that's looking better. So that's what we started with. I mean, definitely the exposure looks good. I think the green in those shadows is really doing something nice in her hair, which has quite a, you know, reddy orangey tinge to it naturally. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Again, it's all just, you know, suck it and see, play with it, see what goes on. But I guess this real success today is I've gone from having this underexposed photo that, you know, I might not be able to use to something that's actually fairly presentable. So hopefully you've learned something from that. I mean, I sure have. I learn something every time I play around with a photo. I should just note, you know, quite often I'd go into Photoshop and just any of these flyaway hairs, you can, you know, remove them. You can do it a little bit too here, but it's a bit less bespoke, I guess, in Adobe Lightroom, and it's a bit easier. It's just a bit easier in Photoshop. It's a bit more built for that sort of thing, you know. Lightroom's a bit more for the quick fixes. But anyway, with this first one I did, you can sort of see where I removed that. You know, there's other things you can do here. That's like red eye reduction, which you shouldn't get if you're, you know, that's only when the flash is on the same axis as the lens, really, and you get a reflection from the back of someone's eyeball. Yeah, there's a whole thing here. That's if you want to, you know, there's plenty of things you can do. I'll just show you what this does quickly because it's kind of fun. You know, if you want a bit of a fade in to draw more attention to her face, this red color isn't actually what's going on with the photo. It's just showing me the sort of gradient of whatever effect I put on here. That probably doesn't make much sense, but you know, I'm playing around with it. And there's this red thing here which is going to tell me when I deselect what I've actually done to the photo, and you can see it now sort of fades in from a dark color, and that's the red area in this sort of adjustment rectangle thing here. I don't use that very often because if I'm doing anything too dramatic, I tend to switch to Photoshop, you know. Yeah, the graduated filter. Anyway, have a play with it. If nothing, hopefully I encourage you just to get in there and have a play with your photos. Okay, should be another one next week. Have fun, everyone. Thanks.